This is an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
David McCloskey is a former CIA analyst turned spy thriller novelist. His third novel has just been released. It's called The Seventh Floor. David joins us via Zoom from Washington, D.C. Hi, David.
Hey, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on the program with us. I want to get into what The Seventh Floor is about, but before we do that, I just want to know, do you have to clear stuff as a former CIA analyst with the CIA when you write?
You do. I was led into a very small room on my last day at Langley and given a large stack of papers, which, of course, I wasn't allowed to keep. But one of them said basically everything I write going forward would have to be cleared by what's known at the CIA as the Publication Review Board. So all of my books, any articles I write, all the way down to how I write about the CIA on my resume, goes through them for clearance, and they can, of course, redact things as they see fit.
Have there been things over the years that you've written that has been redacted? Obviously, you're not going to tell me what they are, but have there been anything?
There have been some things, yes. I try to be careful with what I write and really attempt to not put anything overly sensitive or certainly classified into the books. But there have been a few cases of small things, mostly names of, particular parts of the agency or little bits of tradecraft that they have decided to take out. But it's never been anything that changes the story, let's say, changes the plot. Small things, but there have been some things they've taken out.
Have you ever been surprised by some of the things they might have redacted?
I have been, actually. There have been a number of things that have felt as though they're sort of part of the public domain that have, I guess, not been formally, that the CIA has taken out, like names of particular pieces of the organization that you could find, if you Googled them, but the CIA felt were a little bit sensitive. So those things were a little surprising to me. They are, I will say, though, in general, quite willing to work with me and flexible. And I also try to play by the rules. So I source everything. I mean, literally, I source my novels when I send them to them, so they know where I get the information that I have, and that we can all be comfortable. It doesn't come out of the classified part of my brain.
Okay. I won't grill you anymore on the CIA. Let's talk about the book, The Seventh Floor. What's the story about?
So the Seventh Floor is a story about essentially a modern mole hunt. There is a traitor, a double agent working at Langley, working for Moscow, and they are working on the sort of famed Seventh Floor, which is the CIA's executive suite where the director works and sort of lives and breathes every day. The Russians have someone up there working for them. Who is it? And this is a story that features a really colorful, kind of deranged case officer named Artemis Proctor, who is a feature in my first two books and who's back for this one. She is run out of the service early in the novel and kind of comes back in an unofficial capacity to investigate who this mole might be. And as she does so, she comes up with a short list of suspects that are essentially her closest friends and some of her fiercest enemies. So it's a story, of course, about, modern espionage, the modern CIA betrayal, but it's also a story about friendship and, frankly, what does friendship look like in what can be quite a faithless business?
Describing the plot as you've just described it, going back to my previous question, I would find it difficult for the CIA to agree to any of this being in a book.
They cleared it. What can I say? I'm not revealing sources. I'm not revealing specifics about some of our more sensitive methods. There are some things in here I think that I'm sure don't and won't reflect positively on CIA, but we have, the First Amendment here in the States. We don't have an official Secrets Act like the Brits do that sort of permits the security services to embargo what's written, and they cleared it. So, I'm grateful for that. Let's put it that way, so I can get these stories out.
Well, going back to when you were in the CIA, did your worldview change due to your involvement with the CIA?
Yeah, I think so. I joined really young. I was an undergraduate intern, actually. I took my first polygraph at 19 and joined when I was 20. So I kind of grew up in it. I think one thing it does give you is a perspective on how the world actually works, which I think in some respects is really enlightening and, it's certainly very educational, right? I mean, you really see sort of the guts of how do governments interact with one another? What is the massive gap between what is actually said and what's done? That makes you a little cynical, I think, and that makes you, a good analyst. It, I think, makes and has helped form me as a writer because I have a better understanding of how these governments work, how they interact, how people inside them interact with one another, and it's given me a lot of really great fodder for these stories.
Taking a polygraph when you were 19 years old. Did your parents get the analysis of that?
I'm sure they would love to see it, as would I. They were subjected to, I had to go through a big background investigation, and they had a couple investigators come by the house and do interviews at our house, talk to neighbors, talk to friends. So it was a little bit more invasive, let's say, than any of my high school job interviews had been. We'd all like to see the psych examination, though. That's not something I was privy to in the HR files, but I'd love to see the declassified version of what the agency psychiatrist thought about 19-year-old me as I was being interviewed and polygraphed.
Okay, so again, as a former CIA analyst, should the general public be more worried or more reassured by the geopolitics based on what you know?
I think everyone should be sort of appropriately concerned about the geopolitical situation today. I think we're living in a world where we have a confluence of revenge of geopolitics. You can look at the Middle East, you can look at Russia, you can look at China, you can look at North Korea, the relationships between them. It's a sort of an unprecedented situation in the post-Cold War era to have so many sort of surging or resurgent autocratic powers all around the world. I think you could look at the tech wave we're riding, and in particular the fusion of sort of synthetic biology and artificial intelligence and what that means for sort of the technologization of life and intelligence. And you sort of look at all this and you say, well, let's look at us domestically, and are we better able now to sort of help to manage and steer the international environment than we were 30 years ago? I don't think that's the case. So I'm not a doom and gloom kind of guy in general, but I think I'm appropriately cynical about it and think there are a lot of things to worry about. There's a lot of cause for optimism too, in this country, but certainly on the international scene, I think a lot of things that are worrisome.
Okay, so again, since you're a former CIA analyst who now writes spy thriller novelists, I'll ask that last question from a different perspective. Should the general public be more worried or more reassured by geopolitics after reading your novels?
Well, I think they should be more inclined to keep reading my novels, certainly. I think that the books are trying to deal really realistically with this environment. And so, and by that, I mean the geopolitical environment. So I think I'm hopeful that readers will come to these books and say, I'm being entertained, certainly. I can't stop turning the pages, but I'm also getting a sense through fiction of how the world actually works and what's going on today. The most recent book, The Seventh Floor, is giving you a sense, I hope, of kind of the modern day CIA, the modern day competition between the CIA and its Russian counterparts, the SVR. And the book I'm working on now, the fourth one, is in the middle of the competition or sort of shadow war between Israel and Iran. And so I'm hopeful that as readers engage with this stuff, they're getting a sense of how this actually functions, and importantly, getting a sense of the fact that in the middle of all of these conflicts are actual people who look at them, think about them very differently. And I want to bring readers into that world.
We should mention that your previous two books are Moscow X and also Damascus Station, and now The Seventh Floor. You now have a series. You're writing the fourth. Would you like to see these turned into anything cinematic, either on the big screen or small screen?
Oh, absolutely. I would love that. And we've actually had some success, at least in getting that process going. The film and TV rights have been sold to Damascus Station, the first book, and to Moscow X, the second one. So, hopefully that will happen in the not so distant future. I think that these stories would be wonderful on the small screen and the big screen. And am, crossing my fingers, knocking on wood that it does happen.
Does this give any insight, again, since the CIA is redacting stuff, obviously, does this give any insight when reading your books to the enemy?
Oh, I really hope they do. I mean, in each of the books, I've really attempted to render the opposition, as it were, as credibly and as authentically as possible. So in the first book, Damascus Station, there are Syrian intelligence officers, Syrian government officials, you're in their heads. In the second book, and now the third one, The Seventh Floor, you're in the heads of Russians who are really attempting to penetrate the CIA, to run agents against us, to sort of engineer the way we all think about what's going on in the world. And, I am not trying to create a sense of moral equivalency between us and the opposition, but I am trying to show what those people are like, what they think, and to really bring you into their heads and their worlds. It's really an important piece of this for me to kind of get the personal and character dynamics right for people that we don't normally spend a lot of time, sort of thinking their thoughts and walking in their shoes.
Well, congratulations on your ongoing series. The latest book is The Seventh Floor, which is now out. David, thank you very, very much for being on the program with us.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed our chat.
David McCloskey, author of the spy thriller novel The Seventh Floor. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0793, and you'll find the link to David's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly.
You've just heard an exclusive excerpt from the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder. To hear any or all of the full hour-long shows, visit thestufffile.com. Stuph is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's thestufffile.com. A presentation of Flying Fish Communications.